Hello, everyone. My name is Maria, and I'm 35 years old. What I'm going to share with you today happened 8 months ago, and it completely transformed my life. Growing up, I was what everyone called a good Christian girl. I sang in the church choir, helped with vacation Bible school, and never missed a Sunday service. My parents were proud of me, and everyone saw me as the perfect example of what a young Christian woman should be. But somewhere in my 20s, things started to change. It began so small I didn't even notice it at first. A romance novel here, a movie there. What seemed harmless slowly became something much darker. By the time I realized what was happening, I felt completely trapped. What started as occasional curiosity turned into a daily habit. What began as a habit became a prison that controlled my thoughts and actions. For 5 long years, I lived 2 completely different lives. I tried everything I could think of to break free. I threw away my computer and bought a basic phone. I installed every blocking app available. I confessed to my pastor and joined accountability groups. Nothing worked for more than a few days. The shame was eating me alive. I felt like a complete fraud standing in front of young people talking about purity and holiness when I knew what I was really like inside. The guilt was so heavy I could barely breathe sometimes. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in February. I had spent the entire night doing things I had promised God I would never do again. The next morning, I was supposed to speak at a women's retreat about living a life that honors God. Standing in front of those women, talking about holiness while knowing what I had been doing just hours before, felt like torture. I felt like such a hypocrite. Every word that came out of my mouth felt like a lie. After the retreat, I drove home and just broke down completely. I sat in my car in the driveway and cried until I had no tears left. I couldn't live this double life anymore. The weight of the shame and guilt was crushing me. That night, I made a decision I'm not proud of. I felt so hopeless, so trapped, that I didn't want to keep living. I took an entire bottle of prescription medication and wrote letters to my family apologizing for being such a disappointment. The next thing I remember was waking up in a hospital bed 3 days later. My sister had found me unconscious in my apartment and called the paramedics. The doctors told me I had been clinically dead for nearly 5 minutes while they worked to stabilize me. But during those 5 minutes, something incredible happened that I will never forget. I didn't see a bright light or a tunnel like you hear about in other stories. One moment everything was black, and the next moment I was standing in what looked like a vast library. But this wasn't any ordinary library. The shelves stretched higher than I could see, filled with books that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Then I saw him. Jesus was standing nearby, holding what looked like a Bible. But as I got closer, I could see that something was wrong with it. Pages had been torn out, and other pages were covered with thick black marks, like someone had tried to hide the words underneath. His appearance wasn't like the gentle Jesus I had seen in paintings my whole life. His eyes burned like fire, looking straight through me to my soul. But instead of feeling terrified, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Finally, someone who knew exactly who I was and what I had done. "Maria," he said, and his voice was both powerful and gentle at the same time. "Do you know why you're here?" I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure. I assumed this was Judgment Day. He held up the damaged Bible. "These verses have been hidden," he said, pointing to the black marks. "But these are the words that destroy lust. These are the weapons they don't want you to know about." I stepped closer and could see that the black marks weren't permanent. Underneath them, words were fighting to break through, as if they were alive and struggling to be seen. "Why are they hidden?" I asked. "Because if my people knew the power in these words, the enemy would lose his hold on them. Lust dies when truth is spoken with authority. But they've been convinced these verses are too harsh, too old-fashioned, too difficult." His eyes blazed brighter. "They've been deceived." Then he reached out and touched my forehead. The moment his finger made contact, everything changed. It was like lightning shot through my mind, and suddenly I could see the verses clearly. They appeared in burning gold letters, cutting through the black marks that had been hiding them. The first verse that blazed into my consciousness was from Romans chapter 8, verse 13, "If by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live." I had read this verse many times before, But now I could see it meant something completely different than what I had been taught. This wasn't a suggestion to try harder. This was a command to execute sin, to show it no mercy. Then Job 31 verse 1 exploded across my vision. I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman. Again, I had read it before, but now I understood. This wasn't just a good idea or a nice thought. This was a covenant, a sacred, unbreakable promise. The third verse that burned into my mind was 1 Corinthians 9 verse 27, I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. As these verses blazed in my mind, I heard something terrifying, screaming that wasn't human. Dark shapes writhed in the shadows between the bookshelves, twisted forms that seemed to be in agony. Demons, Jesus said simply. They cannot stand the sound of these words. Watch. He spoke the verses aloud, and the screaming intensified. The shadow creatures literally fled from his voice as if they were being burned. Memorize these, he commanded, looking directly at me. Speak them when temptation comes. They are swords that cut through every lie the enemy tells you. But you must use them. A sword that stays in its sheath saves no one. I nodded desperately, trying to burn the verses into my memory. The man who led you into this addiction, Jesus continued, he will come to you soon. When he does, you'll see that these words have power beyond what you can imagine. Before I could ask what he meant, I heard a sound, beep, beep, beep. It was getting louder and more insistent. It's time, Jesus said. Remember the words. Speak them out loud. They will set you free. The beeping grew louder, and suddenly I was back in the hospital room with nurses and doctors rushing around me. My lips were moving, but no sound was coming out at first. I realized I was trying to say the verses that were still burning in my mind. The next few days were filled with tests, counseling sessions, and worried family members visiting. Everyone kept asking what I remembered about being unconscious. But how do you explain meeting Jesus and receiving Bible verses to fight spiritual battles? They would think the lack of oxygen had damaged my brain. But I knew it was real because I could still feel the verses burning inside me. When I thought about Romans 8 verse 13, I could feel spiritual energy coursing through me. When I remembered Job 31 verse 1, my eyes felt different, cleaner somehow. And when 1 Corinthians 9 verse 27 came to mind, I felt a fierce strength like I could face anything. 2 weeks after I got home from the hospital, I was alone in my apartment when the strongest temptation I had ever experienced hit me. It was like my addiction was trying to drag me back with triple the force to make up for the time I had been clean. My hands were actually shaking as I reached for my laptop. But then I remembered what Jesus had told me. I whispered Romans 8 verse 13 out loud, If by the Spirit I put to death the deeds of the body, I will live. The moment those words left my mouth, something shifted in the atmosphere of the room. The overwhelming urge I had been feeling just vanished completely. Not gradually, instantly. Like someone had flipped a switch. I was so amazed that I checked my computer, expecting to see all the shameful evidence of my past addiction. But it was gone. Completely gone. Not just deleted, but like it had never existed. The bookmarks, the search history, the saved files, everything related to my addiction had been wiped clean, but everything else remained untouched. That's when I knew beyond any doubt that what happened during those 5 minutes was absolutely real. Over the following weeks, I used the verses every time temptation tried to return. And every single time, they worked. Not like positive thinking or trying to distract myself, but like actual spiritual weapons that destroyed the desire at its root. Job 31 verse 1 became my daily declaration. Every morning I would look in the mirror and say, I made a covenant with my eyes, and I meant it like a sacred oath that my life depended on keeping. 1 Corinthians 9 verse 27 became my battle cry when the fight got intense. I finally understood that my flesh wasn't my friend trying to make me happy. It was an enemy trying to destroy me, and it needed to be treated accordingly. About 6 weeks after I left the hospital, something incredible happened. I was reading in my living room when someone knocked on my door. When I looked through the peephole, I couldn't believe what I saw. It was Marcus, the boyfriend who had helped lead me into addiction in the first place. We had broken up right before my suicide attempt, and I hadn't spoken to him since. When I opened the door, he looked terrible. His eyes were red like he had been crying, and his hands were trembling. "Maria," he said, his voice cracking. "I need to talk to you." Something impossible happened. Against my better judgment, I let him in. He sat on my couch and put his head in his hands. "I had a dream about you," he said. "But it wasn't like a normal dream. It was more real than real life. You were standing in this place filled with light, holding some kind of scroll. When you opened it, fire came out and touched me. But it wasn't regular fire. It was fire that burned away all the darkness in my mind. All the lust, all the addiction, all the twisted thoughts. It just burned them right out of me." He looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. "When I woke up, it was all gone, Maria. The addiction, the compulsions, the perverted thoughts, gone like they never existed. And somehow I knew that you were the reason. That God had used you to set me free." I just stared at him, not knowing what to say. "I've been completely clean for a month now," he continued. "Not struggling to be clean, actually clean. The desire is just gone. I knew I had to come and ask for your forgiveness for leading you into that darkness." We both cried then, tears of relief, repentance, and amazement at what God had done. Marcus left that day as a completely different person than when he arrived. We didn't get back together because we both understood that relationship had been built on sin and couldn't be redeemed. But seeing him set free confirmed that the verses Jesus had given me had power beyond just my own deliverance. That was 8 months ago. I've been completely free ever since. Not fighting against temptation, actually free from it. The verses that Jesus burned into my mind that day have become my daily spiritual food. I speak them over myself every morning and whenever the enemy tries to whisper lies. I've shared these verses with other people struggling with similar addictions, and I've watched God do the same miraculous work in their lives. These aren't just nice Bible verses to read during quiet time. They're weapons of spiritual warfare that actually destroy the enemy's grip on our minds and hearts. I know some people will hear this and think I'm making it up, that trauma and lack of oxygen caused me to hallucinate the whole experience. But I don't care what people think anymore. I know what I experienced, and I know what these words have accomplished in my life and in the lives of others. The Bible isn't just a book of suggestions or encouraging thoughts. It's a sword that cuts through spiritual darkness and sets prisoners free. But we have to use it like a sword. We have to speak it with authority and believe it has the power to change our reality. Jesus didn't give me those verses to make me feel better about myself. He gave them to me as weapons to destroy the works of the devil. And they work exactly like he said they would. If you're listening to this and you're trapped in the same kind of addiction I was trapped in, please don't give up hope. There is freedom beyond what you can imagine. But that freedom isn't found in trying harder or having more willpower. It's found in speaking God's truth with the authority He gave it to have. Memorize Romans 8 verse 13. Declare Job 31 verse 1 over your life. Claim 1 Corinthians 9 verse 27 as your battle strategy. Don't just read them. Speak them out loud with faith that they have the power to destroy every lie the enemy has planted in your mind. The enemy wants you to believe you're stuck, that this is just who you are now, that God has given up on you. Those are lies from hell, and they have no power when you speak truth against them. You have everything you need to be completely free. The same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. The same Word that spoke the universe into existence is available to speak freedom into your life. But freedom isn't something that just happens to you. It's something you take by force through speaking God's truth with faith and authority. I died to sin in that hospital room and came back to life with weapons I didn't know existed. Now I'm sharing those weapons with anyone who wants to be free. The choice is yours. You can keep fighting a battle you're losing, or you can start fighting with weapons that actually win. The war is already won. Jesus defeated sin and death and hell on the cross. But you have to enforce that victory in your own life by speaking His word with the authority He gave it to have. Your freedom is waiting. Thank you for listening to my story. If this has encouraged you, please share it with others who might need to hear it. And remember, you are loved, you are not alone, and you are not too far gone for God's grace to reach you. Until we meet again, stay strong in the Lord.